What if I told you that every war, every empire, and every economic collapse in human history can be traced back to three simple things: where people lived, who controlled the money, and how they thought about power? Today we're launching something different. This isn't your typical history channel with dramatic reenactments and feel-good stories. This is the logic of nations, where we strip away the propaganda and examine the cold, hard mechanics of how civilizations actually work. I'm talking about the real blueprints. The names you need to know. The geographic advantages that built empires and the monetary systems that destroyed them. Because here's what they don't teach you in school. You cannot understand the behavior of any nation without understanding two fundamental forces: the history of human thought and the mathematics of money. The philosopher and the banker. The mind and the machine. Let me prove this to you right now. Take the Fertile Crescent, that arc of land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq. Why did civilization start there? Was it random? Absolutely not. It was pure geographic logic. These rivers flooded predictably every year, depositing nutrient-rich silt across the plains. But here's the key: the floods were manageable. Unlike the Nile, which flooded gently, or the Yellow River, which destroyed everything in its path, the Mesopotamian rivers required cooperation to control. You needed organized labor to build irrigation canals. You needed someone to coordinate the work. You needed government. And with government came the world's first currency, grain. Not because some ancient economist sat down and designed it, but because grain was what everyone needed, what could be stored, and what could be measured. The Sumerian word for grain was she, and from this came the shekel, humanity's first standardized unit of account. 1 shekel equaled approximately 180 grains of barley. This wasn't just money, this was the foundation of recorded history itself. Because when you have standardized measurements, you can keep records. And when you keep records, you create accountability. And accountability creates power. Now let's talk about who actually held that power. The Sumerian king list, one of our oldest historical documents, claims that kingship was lowered from heaven and that some rulers reigned for tens of thousands of years. Obviously mythological. But beneath the myth lies a crucial truth about how early rulers legitimized their authority. They didn't just claim political power, they claimed divine mandate. The first entry that archaeologists consider historically reliable is in Mebrajessa of Kish, around 2700 BCE. This man understood something fundamental. In a world without mass communication, your authority depended on controlling both the story and the supply chain. In Mebrajessa built temples not just for religious purposes, but as economic centers. Temples were banks, storage facilities, and administrative headquarters all in one. The priests weren't just spiritual leaders, they were accountants, keeping meticulous records of grain deposits, loans, and tributes. This created the world's first systematic approach to what we now call fractional reserve banking. Farmers would deposit grain after harvest, receive clay tokens as receipts, and these tokens became the medium of exchange throughout the year. This is where geography becomes destiny. The Mesopotamian plains had no natural barriers, no mountains or seas to protect them. This meant constant warfare, but it also meant constant trade. Rulers quickly learned that controlling trade routes was more valuable than controlling territory. They developed the world's first international exchange systems out of pure necessity. If you wanted cedar wood from Lebanon, copper from Anatolia, or precious stones from the Indus Valley, you needed standardized weights, measures, and mediums of exchange that trading partners would accept. The logic was simple but profound: economic cooperation created military advantage. Nations that could efficiently mobilize resources through sophisticated monetary systems could field larger armies, build better fortifications, and maintain longer supply lines. This principle hasn't changed. Modern central banks serve the exact same function as those ancient temple complexes, managing the flow of resources to enable state power. Let's examine how this played out in practice. Hammurabi of Babylon, ruling from 1792 to 1750 BCE, created the world's first comprehensive legal code. But look closely at his laws. Nearly 60% deal with economic relationships, contracts, property rights, debt collection, and commercial disputes. Hammurabi understood that legal stability was prerequisite for monetary stability, and monetary stability was prerequisite for political power. His code standardized interest rates at 20% for silver loans and 33% for grain loans. These weren't arbitrary numbers, they were calculated to balance risk, reward, and social stability. This reveals a crucial pattern in how successful rulers operated. They balanced what we might call small government efficiency with total control mechanisms. Hammurabi's laws were publicly displayed so everyone knew the rules, but the penalties for violating them were severe enough to maintain order. This wasn't ideology, this was practical governance. You needed predictable rules to encourage economic activity, but you needed harsh enforcement to prevent chaos. Fast forward to the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great, 559 to 530 BCE. Here we see the next evolution of this logic. The Persians created the world's first truly international monetary system. They minted standardized gold and silver coins accepted from India to Egypt. But more importantly, they developed what we now recognize as the first systematic approach to managing diverse populations through economic incentives rather than military occupation alone. Local rulers could maintain their customs and religions as long as they paid tribute in the standardized Persian currency. This created what economists call network effects. The more people who used Persian coins, the more valuable those coins became, which incentivized even more people to use them. The Persians had discovered the fundamental principle of monetary hegemony: control the currency, control the civilization. But here's where philosophy enters the equation. Around the same time, in the Greek city-states, thinkers like Zeno of Citium were developing Stoicism. Zeno taught that true freedom came from understanding what you could and couldn't control. In the political realm, this translated to constitutional thinking. How do you create systems that function regardless of who's in charge? The Greeks were simultaneously inventing democratic governance and philosophical logic, and these weren't separate developments. Both emerged from the same insight: sustainable power requires predictable rules that operate independently of individual personalities. The tension between these approaches, the Persian model of monetary hegemony and the Greek model of constitutional governance, would define political development for the next 2 millennia. Every successful empire had to solve the same basic problem: how do you maintain control over diverse populations across vast distances? The answer always came down to the same 2 tools: standardized currency and philosophical legitimacy. Consider Rome at its height. The Romans perfected the Persian monetary model while adopting Greek philosophical concepts. Roman coins were accepted from Britain to Mesopotamia, but Roman law was based on Stoic principles of universal reason. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just an emperor, he was literally a Stoic philosopher. This wasn't coincidence. The Romans understood that lasting power required both economic efficiency and intellectual coherence. When Rome fell, it wasn't because of barbarian invasions or military defeat. It was because of currency debasement. Later emperors, facing impossible fiscal pressures, reduced the silver content of Roman coins from 90% to 5% over 2 centuries. This destroyed the economic foundation of Roman power long before any foreign army reached the city walls. This pattern repeats throughout history. The Byzantine Empire maintained Roman traditions for another 1,000 years, but only by strictly controlling their currency, the gold solidus. Medieval Islamic empires rose and fell based on their ability to maintain the purity of their dinars. The Spanish Empire collapsed when American silver flooded European markets, causing massive inflation that destroyed Spanish purchasing power. Understanding these patterns isn't just historical curiosity. Modern central banks operate on the exact same principles as those ancient temple complexes. The Federal Reserve, established in 1913, serves the same function as Hammurabi's economic laws, managing the flow of credit to maintain political stability. The European Central Bank faces the same challenges as the Persian Empire, maintaining monetary unity across diverse political entities. The geography still matters. The United States benefits from being a continental island, protected by oceans, blessed with navigable rivers, and rich in natural resources. This geographic advantage allows the dollar to function as the world's reserve currency, just as Roman geography once supported the denarius. The philosophy still matters too. Nations succeed when they develop coherent intellectual frameworks for understanding power, justice, and human nature. This is why we study both the banker and the philosopher. The banker tracks the ledger of resources and debt. The philosopher examines the logic of governance and human motivation. Both are necessary. Neither is sufficient alone. Next episode, we'll examine exactly how grain became currency in ancient Mesopotamia, tracking the archaeological evidence for the world's first systematic accounting. We'll name names, show artifacts, and follow the money trail that led from Sumerian temples to modern central banks. No theories. No speculation. Just the documented progression of monetary technology and the rulers who shaped it. This is the logic of nations. Subscribe now if you want to understand how the world actually works.